Welcome to Life in Full Expression with me, your host, Beth Wolfe. In this show, we will explore, elevate, expand, learn how to live your best life. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to live your life in full expression or create an expansive vision for your future? Get ready to be energized, fully express yourself, discover your heart's clarity for dynamic direction in life decisions, and develop your unique capabilities so you are delivering your ever-increasing capacities into your world. Join me, Beth, and unleash the limitless capabilities of your soul, experiencing amazement, collaboration, fun, and purpose. Life in Full Expression starts now. Welcome, you amazing souls. I'm so excited that you've joined me today on Life in Full Expression. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time in our occupational and environmental dimensions. We've got 7 dimensions that we can be in rhythm with our Life in Full Expression. And today, I want to give you a little sneak preview of a course that I have that it's called Bring Your Ideas to Life. And I don't know about you, but how often do you have amazing ideas? They download in, you're like, oh my gosh, those are fantastic. And yet we don't launch them. Yeah, we don't get it done. Somehow they get lost in the mire of life. And part of it is we don't maybe have systems and strategies in place on how to bring these ideas into life. Because I certainly have had a fair amount of ideas downloaded to me, and then I don't put them into reality. It's getting better and better. So today, I want to introduce to you a little bit about how and why our brains may actually be sabotaging our efforts. So we're going to learn a little bit about how our brain works and our memory and stuff. And then also I want to give you 3 strategies today that you can walk away with and put into place in taking control of your working environment is really what I'm after. So let's just take a little back preview of what is our environmental dimension and what is our occupational dimension. Well, one of the ways that I like to describe your environmental dimension is how that you impact your world, how it has an impact on your well-beingness, and how you're having an impact not only internally but externally in your own self, as well as our earth, our amazing Gaia. What's going on in the environment of your work, your social environments, just what does it look like for you to be enhancing both the inside and the outside of your environment? And then the occupational dimension is pretty self-explanatory. It's work, it's your career, but it's about building healthy habits and skills that really are going to enable you to harmonize your work and your life dimensions of all the other part, and ideally contributing your unique skills and talents that is really going to reward you in a way intellectually, emotionally, and creatively, and financially, that your career presents physical, psychological, and mental challenges that enhance your well-being, don't really deter from it. So without further ado, let's dive into, I'm going to ask you a question here. Which is better, having great ideas or executing on those ideas? Well, it's a trick question. Both are absolutely essential, and without ideas, nothing gets created, but without execution, all those great ideas are wasted. So beginning from the initial idea to the final execution can actually be long and sometimes a challenging process, right? Most ideas, even very good ones, can die quickly. Well, a great quote by Sue Grafton, an American detective novelist. She said, "Ideas are easy. It's the execution of the ideas that really separates the sheep from the goats." So what if we were really separating ourselves and taking advantage of this? Well, before we get into the strategies, let's begin to understand a little bit several common hour thinking reasons why you and I might actually abandon our ideas. So here's a little bit. See if which one fits you, might be familiar in your life. First one, they're busy. They have trouble making the time to research and develop an idea. Second, they're not organized and have trouble focusing long enough at a time to actually develop their ideas.
We're going to talk more about this focusing and why it's so challenging and how your brain might actually be sabotaging you at this. And I'm going to give you some solutions for that today in this episode. Another reason that we might abandon our ideas is the lack of belief in ourselves or the actual idea. So when you and I face a setback or maybe even negativity from others, we just fold in, give up. That was a bad idea, forget it. Another one might be for you and I, the fear of failure and the unknown. And I've learned from my mentor that failure is simply a form of feedback. So it doesn't mean that we necessarily stop. It just means that we're going to recalibrate it and come at it at a different angle. And then finally, another reason that you and I simply don't know what concrete steps to take to actually develop our ideas. And so even when people do get a project off the ground and actually begin developing the idea, they often hit what Scott Beliski, an amazing book that he wrote called Making Ideas Happen. I highly recommend it. I'll put a link in this episode's segment, and it's called The Project Plateau. Can you relate to that? Have you experienced a project plateau? Well, this is the period during which our initial excitement over an idea starts to wane in the light of maybe challenging, you could even say hard work it takes to execute on the idea. And we abandon the idea in favor of the next shiny object, which we're going to talk a little bit about the squirrel that you might get distracted with. So today I'm going to cover importance of attention and focus and share how your brain often works against you when you're trying to do focused work. So you might ask the question to yourselves, oh my gosh, why can't I focus? What happened to my focus? I'm going to talk about that today. And then I'm also going to gift you in the episode notes today of how to assess your ability to focus. We're going to talk about the squirrel effect and when your working memory actually works against you. We're going to talk about that and bring that into a couple categories. So there's ways to design your work environment to actually eliminate distractions so you can focus on generating and developing your ideas. So I'm going to give you a little bit on how to take control of your work environment, creating a work environment that works for you instead of against you, and ultimately eliminating those distractions. So a quote by a very famous golfer, Tom Kite, he said that you can always find a distraction if you're looking for one. Now, I've golfed a fair amount and I can actually say that, man, when you're up there on the tee and you're ready to hit the golf ball and you're like, okay, well, I don't want to hit that tree. You guess what happened. I hit the tree. One time golfing, it was so funny. We were out golfing and I was not doing very well that day, and I was focused on the tree and the metal, waste paper basket. And I think that day I hit 2 or 3 trees and a waste basket. It became quite hilarious in our family. My daughters were reminding me of that. So when we focus and let ourselves be just on distractions, sure enough, that's exactly where we're going to end up doing, is being in distraction world. Well, let me tell you a little bit about our brain. It isn't actually designed for extended periods of focus. When I began to read more about this, I was like, okay, that's not encouraging to me that my brain is not designed for extended periods of focus, which is a little bit unfortunate, but to come up with creative ideas and see them through the development and the execution stages does take a fair amount of focus, right? So the first step toward overcoming this particular challenge is to learn how our brain sometimes works against us when we're trying to focus. So I want to tell you about 2 design features about our human brain that make focused work a little bit challenging. The first design feature is called the stimulus-driven attention system. And the second one is our working memory limitations. And that second one was a pretty good game changer for me recently. So I'm going to explain both of these brain features and suggest some steps you can take to overcome the challenges they present. There's another great book that I used in this course to do a little bit of researching. It was written by Cal Newport, and it's called Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And he shares a pretty basic formula that makes real sense. It's intensity of focus times your time spent is going to equal quality of work. Well, nothing surprising there. Most of us know that. And if we're going to get work done, we do need to focus and put the time in. But since none of us ever seems to have enough time, that's our paradigm, that's our belief, that might be our habits up until now to do everything we need to do. And it's not likely that we're going to be able to create more than 24 hours in a day. Our ability to focus is the key to making things happen, to bringing your idea to life. So there's therefore crucial ways that we want to learn a variety of strategies on how to do this. To focus quickly on a task is going to be very crucial. And secondly, remain focused long enough to actually achieve the creative, goal that you're looking at. And so there's a little bit of challenges to come over. So let me explain a little bit about when most people think about getting focused. This might come into play for you. They think about their willpower. But let's be honest, when it comes to maintaining laser-like focus for long stretches of time, especially in the face of distractions, well, willpower can rarely be enough, right? All of us have a point where we actually hit the wall and can no longer maintain the necessary focus through willpower alone, which means we're going to get to learn some strategies that will take willpower out of the equation, at least to some extent. And I'll give you number one of those strategies. In addition to the challenge of sustaining willpower, many of us, maybe you, struggle because your work environment actively works against you when you're trying to stay and get focused. And if you're in an office, maybe that's chaotic or loud or filled with other types of distractions, you're going to get steps to take that will help bring that a bit under control. Here's another challenge, has to do with the way we work. This was a game changer for me. So pay attention to see if the way you're working is actually benefiting you or creating more challenges. So that is, if we haven't structured our time and work habits in such a way that they support us in remaining focused, we'll never get the maximum amount of work done in those short periods of time. So without effective systems and good working habits, your effort, my efforts to stay focused will achieve what's called spotty results. Can you relate to that? So finally, even if we find a way to get focused and organized so that we become highly productive in our own work, the full development and execution of our ideas often comes down to this one component as well. How well can you and I work with others to actually carry things through to completion? Because we're all working in collaborative environments. So this means that you'll get to develop excellent project management skills in addition to your personal skills. So to sum it up, to be highly effective at coming up with ideas and developing those ideas and executing those ideas, you get to be strong in some following areas. So number one area is you get to create a work environment that allows you to do deep, focused work. You get to develop systems that structure your work time for maximum efficiency. And you get to develop good work habits that allow you to be productive within your particular systems. And in many cases, you get to develop the ability to direct your work of a team to fully execute your ideas. So this is a pretty comprehensive vision, and it's also possible. So the first step to do that is look at your right mindset of going in. It would be a good idea to assess where you are currently. That's always a great thing. I did that today in an exercise in another part of my life. So what I've created for you in this episode, as well as for this mini course called Bring Your Ideas to Life, is a self-assessment. And that'll provide really a link to what's going well and what's not going well. And I'll link that in our episode. So there's 4 areas in this assessment that you're going to score yourself. And it's going to be a scale from 1 to 5. 1 means you disagree strongly. 5 means you strongly agree. So what are these 4 areas? Number 1, you're going to assess your work environment. 2, your systems. 3, your habits. And 4, your project management. So let me give you a little bit of flavor of what's in the assessment, because there's a lot of questions. Don't have time to give it all in this particular episode. But for your work environment, score yourself on this one. In your office space, you have everything, books, papers, files, digital files, etc., organized so that you can quickly find any resource you need when you're working. Where do you score? Do you strongly disagree? Or do you strongly agree, and you can put yourself anywhere in between? Here's an example for about your systems and scoring yourself. You know what really your best work hours are, and you consistently use those times to get the most of your best and most important work done. I work best early in the morning. Do you know what your work absolute efficient and effective time is in the day? Okay, and then the third area, work habits. Here's a little flavor of the assessment. You consistently start your work days with the biggest, most challenging, and most important work task of the day. Now, in this particular course, it references a book by Brian Tracy about eating the frog. And it kind of comes from really a quote from Mark Twain about do the hardest thing first, is in a sense. So if you eat the frog first, the rest of the day is great, is where that comes from. And then 4th is the project management. Score yourself on this one. You consistently separate the key action steps that need to be taken to move your project forward and secondary tasks that can be done later. And you consistently spend your time focused only on really the key action steps to get completed. So there's a little flavor of the self-assessment. There's probably about 20 to 25 questions in that assessment. And there's, 3 or anywhere from 2 to 6 questions in each area. So again, I'll link that up so that you can have that. That's a gift. And we're going to take a short break. And when you come back, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why there is the challenge of getting distracted to the squirrel, and a little bit of fun story from a Disney movie. So we're going to take a short break, come on back, and let's learn about the challenge of the squirrel. I'll be right back after this short message. Well, welcome back, you guys, to the segment about the challenge of the squirrel, and how to bring your ideas to life is really what we're learning about today. And I want to just let you know about what are the 2 built-in features of the brain, our brains, that make it difficult for us to actually focus on our work. And I mentioned a little bit earlier in the first segment about a stimulus-driven attention system and also our working memory limitation. So let me break down this stimulus-driven attention system. It's actually 3 components. And the first part of it is our arousal network. And this is our level of general alertness, wakefulness, and energy. So when our arousal network is working at high pitch, we have tons of energy. Remember those times when you've got tons of energy? But we also tend to be a bit flighty and unstable to maintain focus when our energy is that high. You might relate to a phrase that says, I feel like I'm bouncing off the walls. That's when you're in a high arousal there. So when our arousal network is actually running low, on the other hand, we can feel super lethargic. And so obviously we don't want to be in this high state. We don't want to be in this low state of energy. You and I want to have this arousal network to really be in the medium state so that you can actually focus on there. So the next part of our second attention is focused attention. So this comes to really when someone's talking to you and they give you a phrase like this, hey, Beth, pay attention. That's what basically what they're really asking me, if someone's saying that to me, is they want me to focus on the specific thing that they're asking me to focus on at that time. And this is clearly the kind of attention that we want to use when we're working. We want to focus on one task at a time. I truly don't believe that we can multitask when we're trying to do deep focused work. It's much more, you'll find out more about this in working memory. You're going to be much more effective and efficient by doing one task at a time and maintain that focus long enough to get the job done. The third system of stimulus-driven attention really exists to help us survive. It's always running in the background, scanning the environment for danger and calling our attention to any sight or sound that might possibly indicate a problem. But here's the thing. In our modern world right now, 99.9% of the stimuli in general that grab our stimulus-driven attention in developed countries, but mostly our attention system, most of the time that it is harmless. 99.9% of the time, it's just simply harmless. But our attention-driven system doesn't know that. It's just doing its job. So unfortunately, every time the system alerts us to something going on around us, our concentration is broken and we lose focus on our work. I have had many coaching clients ask me, when that happens, or I'm going from one meeting to another, how do I get myself really ready for the next thing? And I ask them to tap into their mental faculty of imagination. And in that moment, imagine themselves already in that meeting and getting that focus going. So as you can see, we have this complex interplay of three attentional systems, and each has to be doing an important job. And as far as work goes, what we want is to actually be in the zone, in the medium arousal. So we're neither too hyped or we're too drowsy. And use our focused attention system to really zoom in on the work at hand, and then limit the number of times that our stimulus-driven system kicks in to call our attention away from our work. So it may seem a little bit complicated, leaving aside the baseline role of the arousal system. Here's the key takeaway from this particular discussion about these three systems is that the focused attention system and the stimulus-driven attention system are a little bit at war at each other. You know, you want to focus, but you're being pulled away. Focus, being pulled away. So I want to give you an image right now. If you haven't seen the movie Up that was created and produced by Disney, if so, if you did see it, you probably remember the golden retriever named Doug, who has a collar that allows people to hear his thoughts. And Doug would be talking to one of the other characters, and then suddenly he'd stop, whip his head around, look off in another direction and say, squirrel. And after watching the squirrel for a second or two, he turned back to the character he was originally talking to continue the conversation. How many times have you experienced that? And just imagining that happening in the movie. So really, this is pretty much what happens when we're working on our stimulus-driven attention system. It kicks in. It's like saying squirrel to us, and we have to turn and orientate ourselves to the indicated stimulus. And then once we've determined that it's not important, we can get back to work. But that's when another problem kicks in. Now we have to refocus to our work. And in other words, we must use our focused attention system to figure out, well, where was I in my work? Where did I get interrupted? And how do I get back into my train of thought? So every time we go through the squirrel sequence, we lose time and productivity. And do this often enough across a workday, we end up saying a phrase, and maybe you've said this to yourself, because I certainly have. Boy, I sure didn't get much done today. Oh my goodness. Yes, I've said that. So let's talk a little bit about your working memory and how that might work against you. All right. There's another built-in feature in our human brain that often works against this sustained concentration, and it's our working memory limitation. But a lot of times when we're talking about memory, we kind of go first to long-term memory. That's where I went initially. And there are many things really we're exposed to in our lives that we don't store in our long-term memory. But pretty much anything that we deem important enough to remember gets stored there, whether it's important events in our lives or important information we've learned. The cool thing is that we have an almost unlimited storage space for information in our long-term memories. Super cool. But not so much. We can actually, when we start talking about focusing on a task, unfortunately, we can only consciously access a small fragment of that material at a time. According to research, really from 3 to 9 pieces of information can we access at a time, depending on the situation and the kind of material we're accessing. The system that allows you and I to think consciously about a small amount of material at a time is actually called our working memory. So if you only have space in your conscious working memory to hold 3 to 9 pieces of information at a time, what happens when you reach the limit? Well, something's got to go. That's what we've all experienced. We're thinking about one thing, then we shift our focus to think about something else for a few moments. And before you know it, we're thinking, wait a minute, now, what was I thinking about? Or you go in a room and you're like, why did I come in this room? You might have accessed already your capacity of your working memory, and that's why you may be losing your train of thought. So what happens when you and I basically were in a distracting work environment? Okay, so let's get back to this. There's 3 possibilities, 2 or 3 that are really not so great. Let's say you are able to muster your massive willpower and ignore the distractions and stay focused on your task. Well, we know that that can only hold true for a time. Something in your environment rises to a high enough level of distraction for your stimulus-driven attention system to actually yank your focus away from your task and make you look at it or listen to it. This happened to me just before going on this podcast, just out in front of my house. I was like, oh, there's a squirrel out there. Literally, I was distracted by something that was going on. So some distractions don't quite rise to the level of necessary to alert our actual stimulus-driven system, yet are distracting enough to take up some of our working space memory, which will negatively impact our focus, which then negatively impacts really bringing your ideas to life. So the types of distraction that tend to alert that SDA system usually are loud, bright, moving noises, the really acute. And I mean, by which I mean that steady state sounds or sights, they don't usually alert your SDA system. But irregular sounds and sights, especially movement in our periphery, they usually do. But there are other distractions in our environment, like the email program sitting open with emails coming in. There might be a television playing in the background, kind of less intrusive, more steady state. They're more chronic than acute. And these stimuli, even though we're usually unaware of them, nevertheless, they actually take up part of our limited working memory capacity, leaving us less available for focus on our work. And I've even changed this as I've learned this. I'm like, if I really want to work effectively and efficiently, put myself in my office, no other distractions, because sometimes I would put myself in front of the TV and work, but I'm not going to get it done very effectively and efficiently. So 2 ways you can increase your odds of staying focused. 1, design your work environment in such a way that allows you to pay attention to only the work in front of you and to eliminate the distractions. So yeah, that might be one of the ways that they created a cubicle, but it's great if you can have, even headphones where you could have some focused music being played on them that can eliminate distractions. So let's recap and reflect a little bit. So far, we have looked at distraction from a biological perspective. Specifically, there are 2 built-in brain processes that I've talked about so far that keep us from focusing on your work. Number 1 is the stimulus-driven attention system. Remember, it constantly scans the environment to identify sources of danger. And this means that every time there's a sudden noise or sudden movement in your field of vision, that SDA system forces you to basically come away from your task and check it out. And then you got to come back and refocus. The other one is your working memory system. It has a limited storage capacity, according to research, about 3 to 9 things at a time. So again, if you've got more than 3 to 9 things going on at once, you're going to affect the efficiency and effectiveness of your work. So the combination of these 2 processes can make maintaining focus on your work a little bit challenging. So now you can see kind of how they might war against each other. Well, let's go ahead and go into our last and final break. And when we come back after this break, I want to give you some tips for taking control of your working environment, some strategies for you really stepping into that, and start off with leaving us with this quote that whatever we put our attention on will grow stronger in our life. So let's put some attention on after this short break. We'll come back with some strategies for you to help you fix your focus and really escalate it. All right, I'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, you guys, to Bring Your Ideas to Life. And in the first few segments, I really brought out what are the challenges that is really interrupting us from focusing and bringing these ideas to life. We talked about the squirrel and taking our attention off that. Our brain likes to really make sure that we're safe. And so it's a little bit of a challenge to us to stay in a focused state of mind when part of our brain is making sure that we're safe. So I want to give you in this last segment some strategies to really help us. So to increase our focus and then decrease the competition for it. Again, the quote I used as we went off to break was, whatever we put our attention on will grow stronger in life. So let's look at the big picture here. The storage systems in your workspace, just asking yourself right now, what's on your desk? Do you have things all over your desk? How do you manage, or maybe don't manage, the people around you during your work time? I know for a fact that when, some people really want to focus at times, they have focus office time, close the door, can't get in, you're not going to reach them on their phone. How do you manage that? Do you have a time like that, or do you let people interrupt you all the time? So these factors really can have a profound impact on how much work you are going to be getting done. And yet most people actually rarely give them a thought. So let me give you one strategy to start with out of 3. And this is, number 1, a place for everything and everything in its place. I love that. I love being organized. So one way to keep from reducing your working memory capacity is to have systems for keeping all your materials, I'll get that word out, materials, where you can quickly find them whenever you need them. And this includes both physical and digital materials, definitely. So having well-organized systems increases your work efficiency in two ways. The first obvious benefit is that when you need some material, you know right where it is. You simply reach out, grab it off a shelf, or open a file cabinet drawer, or pull it out, or click on a mouse a few times and open the needed document. So you're knowing where everything is basically going to reduce the wasted time looking for a particular item. Second benefit is possibly even more powerful, simply knowing that you can find anything you need easily when you need it. It removes that little worry from the back of your mind of freeing up working memory space. This allows you to work at a higher level of focus consistently. And what it brings up too is that if you're leaving a lot of projects kind of out on the periphery and they're using up some of your working memory and you're leaving them incomplete, it draws from your energy. And so one of the things that I work with, not only myself, but my coaching clients that are entrepreneurs, is making sure that they're completing tasks, because that's taking up space from that focus time and it's not going to be as powerful and efficient. So having your reference materials and archives well organized gives you a leg up on the competition. Again, another amazing client that I have is a general contractor. So part of his organizational system is actually physical materials that he knows exactly where they are and he can find them. All right, number 2 strategy. A clean desk equals a clean mind. Yes, another attention hack is to have only the work you currently need on the desk. You may have 3 projects revolving in different stages of completion. And when you're at a pausing point of one, waiting for feedback from maybe another source or something, you want to make good use of your work time by switching off to one of the other projects. Get that stuff off your desk if at all possible. But that doesn't mean that you're going to, keep stacks of folders and reference materials for all 3 projects all over the place at the same time. No, if you want to keep your mind uncluttered, keep your desk uncluttered. Take the extra couple of minutes it takes to put away the other 2 projects and only have the materials needed for the project you're working on at that moment. Now, here's the benefit of that. Couple benefits. You don't lose time by shifting papers around from one stack to another, possibly getting things mixed up together, and then you need to be sorted out again. And because you only have materials for one project open in front of you, your brain won't waste time, any of its limited working memory space, thinking about the other 2 projects. This is something that I've really accelerated just recently, spending time in developing this course. Is what does it look like for me to just have everything off my desk? I'm not thinking about it. But I'm still working on those. I have a few projects that are not completed that I can feel that they're draining a little bit of my working memory. All right, number 3 strategy I want to give to you today is manage your people access. Boy, in this world of, having basically your own personal computer in your hand and all the notifications that can come in, not only digitally, but also the people coming in physically, maybe. We've only talked about distracting elements in your environment that are intimate, right? But we can't fail to address the people. The most distracting, really distraction of all is a person coming in and interrupting your workflow. So if you work in an office with other people, your options for eliminating distractions, they might be a little bit limited, but there's always a solution where there's a problem. That's my belief. So this is why they invented the most despised office structure ever, the cubicle. Yes, cubicles suck for many reasons, but sometimes they can help at least a little bit in reducing distractions. But usually, you're going to need some other strategies, like I mentioned earlier, like noise canceling headphones or some background music, for example, that helps you stay focused. Remember, if it's a chronic kind of low state, it's not going to take your attention away. It's those ones that are loud and acute. So here's an exercise for you today to just put this into place, to actually take steps, is open up a piece of paper, have it out there. Now look around at your workspace right now. Just take a look at it, and on a piece of paper, go ahead and write down all the details of describing what you see and hear. Because in order for you to begin to really transform this element of bringing your ideas to life, you got to at least look at what's your working environment right now. So just right after this podcast, go ahead and just take a look around as well as listen to what your workspace looks like. So I've pointed out a few areas to think about: your storage systems, your desk, your interactions with people. So be sure to describe those. And what other environmental factors are peculiar maybe to your office space or your workspace might be sources of distraction. You know, you may not be in an office. You could actually be in some kind of large working warehouse or something like that. So I wanted to read to you just a little bit. We've got time left, from this amazing book by Scott Belinsky on making ideas happen. And the very end of it, he talks a bit about self-leadership, because that's really what we're coming down to in this podcast, is talking about self-leadership. So he says, really, self-leadership isn't a concept that most of us think about all that often. Yet leadership capability relates as much to how we lead ourselves as to how we lead others. Some of the greatest barriers we face along the path to pushing our ideas to fruition lie within us. Most creative leaders can trace their greatest obstacles to something personal: a fear, insecurity, or self-imposed limitation. And as we consider past battles that drained our energy, Scott talks about such as partnerships that fizzled or a team that gradually disbanded under your watch. He says that we must challenge ourselves to acknowledge our role in the failure. Our flawed judgment is often the root cause. So he says, as you lead others in creative pursuits, you are your greatest liability. Self-leadership is about awareness, tolerance, and not letting your own natural tendencies limit your potential. And I wanted to read a little bit about finding a path to self-awareness that Scott talks about. He says, a motif throughout my research and this book has been the battle against our natural tendencies. The forces of organization, community, and leadership capability often evade us because our tendencies to constantly generate more ideas, to isolate ourselves, and so on, get in the way. Even with insights and best practices for how to better generate ideas, organization projects leverage communal forces and lead others, it is still easy to regress. Our best hope for staying on track is to notice when we stray and to figure out why, to be self-aware. Self-awareness is a crucial skill in leadership, but it is deeply personal. It is not about our actions, but about the emotions that trigger our actions. And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to finish this podcast with this. He talks about earlier in this book, he references G. Lee, the uber productive visionary at the helm of the Google Creative Lab, a man with a long history of taking action on creative inspirations. And Scott said when he spoke with Lee, he elaborated on the grander role of emotion in creative work. quote unquote, society teaches us to suppress emotions, Lee explains, but to effectively lead, you must understand and hone them. Lee's personal journey, like that of many other leaders in the creative world, has included a commitment to psychological growth. For Lee, this meant group therapy. He describes group therapy as all about being in the moment and really listening to others. In group therapy, members develop a contained set of relationships that play out like the real world, but in a safe environment. The setting allows our self-discovery of the emotions behind our actions. If someone says something that bothers you, you're encouraged to express that feeling. Statements like, "What you said makes me angry," or "You are annoying me," or "I feel afraid," are not uncommon. Expressing these raw emotions in a safe environment serves as a catalyst for understanding what lies beneath them. The insights gained from group discussion are especially empowering in the real world, where these emotions are almost always suppressed. So Lee and many other admired leaders in the creative world have made a personal investment, whether through group therapy, personal advisory boards, circles, or otherwise, to understand the emotional impetus for their actions. The construct of circles discussed earlier can serve as a source of self-awareness if members are willing to trust each other and feel vulnerable. Some leaders I have met have assembled a personal advisory boards for themselves, usually a group of 3 or 4 people with whom they share their fears and solicit candid feedback. The mechanism you choose can vary, as long as you're being challenged to be more introspective. With increased self-awareness, we become better students of ourselves. And when we make mistakes, we are able to identify what we could have done better more readily. And when we receive feedback from others, it becomes more actionable as we come to understand its correlation with our emotions. The path to self-awareness never ends, but we must traverse it nonetheless. So emerging leaders in the creative world benefit from some sort of psychological development in their lives. An early commitment to developing self-awareness will yield better judgment. And in turn, sound judgment builds lasting relationships and great decisions, the kind that garner the respect and confidence you need to lead bold pursuits. A great book, Making Ideas Happen by Scott Belsky. And again, just ending with that and thanking you for joining me in this Life in Full Expression episode about bringing your ideas to life. I love that we're ending it with self-awareness because that's really where it comes down to. I hope you've learned a few things about your brain today and how it can kind of war against each other. And have a great day. I'll see you back here on Transformation Talk Radio on next Monday at noon Pacific time. All right, until then, take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Life in Full Expression with me, Beth Wolfe. Tune in each Monday at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Be your most elevated self and pursue a path of fulfillment, clarity, expansion, fun, and live in your best life. If you would like to discover the 7 dimensions of your life blueprint of expression, to fully express yourself, reveal your heart's clarity for dynamic direction, and activate your unique capability, visit BethWolfe.com. That's Beth, WOLFE.com.